In the midst of an immense spiritual awakening, more and more people are questioning the orthodox way of life. The sleeping giants are emerging from their slumber with their eyes wide open and hunger in their hearts for the truth.
ICANN Planet presents The Big Awakening, the UK's biggest truth conference. Don't miss Majkl, Tsarion, Sabat, Robert Green, Ian R. Crane and Lee David at the Middleton Arena, Manchester, June the 18th, 10 till 10. Tickets available at icannplanet.com.
Hello and welcome to icannplanet.com. I'm Matthew Stevens and thanks for everybody for taking the time to tune in with us this evening. Tonight it gives me great pleasure to introduce our special guest, a scholar armed with an immense body of knowledge and an incredible intellectual understanding of many subjects relating to the occult agenda of the Illuminati. He has dedicated much of his life to exposing the New World Order and revealing many hidden truths that are intentionally concealed from us by the illumined priests that operate behind the veil. Many have scratched the surface on the true history of the arcane mysteries and their influence and control on modern-day civilization, but few have dared to dig as deep as tonight's guest. He'll be headlining the Big Awakening Conference on the 18th of June down at the Middleton Arena. Without further ado, Majkl Tsarion. Welcome to the show, Majkl.
Oh, Matthew, thank you very much. Pleasure to be on.
It's great to catch up with you. How have you been, okay?
Yeah, it's busy, but fine, sure.
Fantastic. Looking forward to the 18th, working with you on the conference there, Majkl. That's coming up quick and fast, so should be fantastic. Do you know what you're presenting on at the moment?
Yes, it'll be on, again, 2012, post-humanism, sort of like almost a continuation from my age of manipulation talk we did last year. That focused a little bit more on symbolism, but we did touch on many other areas, as my work always does. This time we'll go a little bit less on the symbolism, because I've covered that so thoroughly, and look more now at what this global village concept is about, what constitutes it, looking again at the ingredients of transhumanism, posthumanism, what exactly causes this. Well, what causes the global elite to do what they're doing, but then also looking, which is my speciality, is looking at what we are doing as quote-unquote the slave to perpetuate this. This is an area that I don't think a lot of people are looking at enough. I've always said that people leave consciousness at the door. This, I think, is an absolutely fatal mistake, because the people in control have lots of power. Their power is in many areas, but in my reading of this whole problem, their power lies mostly in the knowledge of the human psyche, be it the ancient psyche and certainly the current psyche, and they have their fingers on that pulse. And therefore, if we don't factor in certain amounts of philosophy, certain amounts of psychology, we don't stand a chance. This fight is a fight that will be won through intelligence and imagination. And I don't believe we're up to speed yet on the intelligence. We're doing great. I must say, I'm not a pessimist. We're doing fantastic. I believe this is an age of answers. I believe that we've never had the opportunity before to find out what has been concealed from us. However, one has to always add that answers are only available to those who ask the right questions. So even though we are in a certain, from a zodiological point of view or just from an epochal point of view, a historical point of view, I do believe we're in the age of answers, but it still comes down to the individual asking the question, the right questions, and then something else again. Because a lot of people can say, I want the truth, but not many people are willing to walk the road. Not many people have enough guts to take those answers. So you can divide mankind into four categories, basically. Those who want the truth and those who don't. And we know who the ones who don't are. That's the masses of the world. And then you still have another subcategory, which is those who want the answers at any cost. And those who say they want the answers, but when they find out there's a price to pay, like hard work, time, deliberation, sacrifice, well, they're out of the picture. They take a powder. So there's really two basic categories of people, which is those who want the answers and those who don't. And then two subcategories, those who are willing to put their life on the line for those answers and do whatever it takes to follow that up. And then you have a whole bunch of other people who find out, oh, Jesus, that's too much work. I can't be bothered with that. Where's my beer? Where's the remote control? So even in this so-called conspiratorial movement, we have a lot of those people still. We're still not quite there yet. There's a lot of people saying lip service, saying they want the answers, but again, they're not really willing to do the work at all so far.
And you think this will change and elevate a quickening pace as we move up to 2012, do you, Majkl?
Well, yes, the people like yourself doing fantastic work like yourself, and let me add a personal note of thanks for, again, putting on this marvelous conference. It's always a pleasure for me to come to England. I always have a great time, and I find that is very special because, you can actually write yourself up as one of the very few people who's even bothered to do that, to go the distance. It's exactly what I'm saying, is that England should be having conferences like this every other weekend, and they're not. It's very far and few between. So again, my first statements are very much pertinent to what you're doing, which is that you have taken that next step. You are putting out the effort. You are making a sacrifice. You are believing in the stuff, and you do want answers at any cost, and that's what it takes. Everybody else just wants to, tell me all about it for free, and also just sit back and accept it and really don't do anything about it.
Yeah.
One has to get up and do something about it as well. Create a forum, create a podcast, create a website, disseminate information. Long before the internet, I was out there putting leaflets up on, grocery store boards and handing them out in the streets and leaving little flyers here and there where I thought people might want to, read it, like the occult history of America or,
right.
Whatever it might have been, So I've been doing I've been doing that actually longer than I was known. I got known only from about, maybe 2000 or something like that. But from 1990, as soon as I arrived in the shores of America, during Desert Storm, that's what we were doing. So just as long as I've been known, equal amount of time, 10 more years, I was literally doing it on the grassroots level, just going to bookshops and leaving flyers and printing out things at Kinko's all night long. This is a place you do it in America. Going at night because it was cheaper to print individual copies and staying there all night. A friend of mine, we'd print as much as we could from these obscure books and hoping to give them out in the streets or even, put them in public places. So again, it takes the passion and it takes the guts and it takes to not have everyone else do it for you, But yes, I agree. I think it is going forward. As I said, I am an optimist and I'm practical enough to say we're in the early stages of it yet. But I just also am realistic to realize there's still a long way to go, and we must bring consciousness into it. So my talk will focus a great deal on that, the aspect of how consciousness is manipulated, the psychic dictatorship. How does this whole architecture of control work on us emotionally and psychically and psychologically? Basically, that's the focus.
Great stuff. I'm really looking forward to that. And let me add to your comment and your kind words there. It's an honour to work with you as well, mate, and to have yourself come and speak on our platform that we're providing for speakers. So, yeah, great. Let's crack on. Majkl, tonight we discussed we were going to have a little chat about Lucifer, because it seemed there's quite a common misunderstanding and misconception of what Lucifer actually is or represents. So I was hoping you could maybe break this down a little bit for us and show us where the misunderstandings come from,
Oh, yes. Well, that's a fantastic subject, and I'm glad you asked a question about it because I haven't had the opportunity to really get into it. I've gone into it thoroughly in my Irish Origins book, and on the Irish Origins website, there's also an appendices page getting into this thing, because Luciferianism is nothing evil at all. The Luciferians are evil, let's get that straight. But Luciferianism is merely worship of light, the worship of the sun originally, and then the worship of light. And so it certainly is an esoteric subject. And Luciferian is a noun. It refers to the Illuminati. It refers to the ancient Atenists. They can also be known as the princes of light, which is the term that I use for them. The term that they use for themselves is Gaionum. This is extremely elite, very, very high level princes of light that either have ideological or biological heredity going back to the solar cults of the ancient world. So there's that. There's the principle that that word refers to a cabal of worshippers of light. This is long before you make a value judgment about what they're up to and whether they're good or they're bad or whatever, because, presumably solar worship is a very ancient thing. Not everybody who's been into it is some sort of dark, creature from the slime, who's trying to manipulate the human race. Solar worship is a very positive thing. Christianity is nothing but solar worship, as many of the other religions are. So there's nothing inherently wrong with the worship of light. But the cult of Luciferians or this Gaianum or these Levites or whatever, Illuminati or whatever terms people want to use, I also refer to them as the Black Lodge, they have a particular understanding of light. You can get this clearly from even their own writings. And I refer to it that they are worshippers of really what you might want to call the dark side of the sun. And that's because they are fully understand that light can be used as a weapon, that light has extremely destructive principles, in the sense that if you go out and stand and look at the sun because you admire its beauty, probably you'll lose your eyesight. It'll burn your retina out. So just on that simple principle alone, physically we can understand that light has enormously powerful destructive properties. It not only warms us and heats us and lights us, it can scald, it can burn, and it can desiccate. So there's lots of things about light that we don't understand, and how it's being used as a weapon is fully understood by this particular cabal. But then again, stepping out of that module, the word Lucifer is always, from a traditional point of view, considered identical with Satan. And my work is to try and show that there's no equivalency at all. They're not the same thing in any sense of the word. Right. And that's just from stupidity from these biblical commenters. And I have to say that these people, most Christians and most Jews, most people of official religions, haven't the foggiest idea where their religions come from, who's behind it, what it's all about. And this is made more mysterious, I think, when you find out that these people who have habitually taken the Bible literally, which means that they actually do believe that it was a frolicking man and woman in the Garden of Eden who got tempted by a serpent. Need I go on? They actually take this literally. Well, then I'd say to them that why don't you take Matthew 13:34 literally, the passage that says, all these things spake Jesus unto the multitude in parables, and without a parable spake he not unto them. And if that's some sort of the language of that is too antique for people, well, then we just go to the basic Bible English, and it simply means all these things Jesus said to the people, he did so in the form of stories, and without a story he did not say anything to them. So, all right, so you take the Bible literally. Go ahead, now's your moment. What does the passage say? He says that Jesus spoke in parables and metaphors and allegories. Could astrotheology be one of those allegories? Could Masonic or alchemical symbolism be one of those levels of parable? Could psychology of a kind? Could Kabbalah? Hang on a minute. In the upper echelons of both the Christian church and Judaism, they have Kabbalistic tuition. They have Kabbalistic grades. Within Masonry, they have it. Could Jesus be talking in parables? Is that what that means? Because it's right there. Take it literally, all you literal people, that the Bible cannot be taken. No part of the Bible, no part of the Scriptures now, certainly that part which is the New Testament, can be taken literally. Gee, what are we going to do now? You see, so even from their own logic. So then to answer your question, then when you say, Satan, Lucifer, what is that? Well, that's that worm, that's that devilish serpent that tempted Eve and all the rest of it.
So this has just been kind of associated, just like, it's almost like a presumption, isn't it? Lucifer and Satan, they must be the same thing. I mean, how is there this connection? Is that just kind of lack of research that people are not looking in the ancient texts and what have you, or has there been kind of an agenda to push this, that Satan and Lucifer are one and the same?
I believe there's an agenda to it. Absolutely. Because remember, as we're pointing, I'm being somewhat facetious here, but obviously a brainless fool, let alone anybody who's learned Aramaic and these Hebrew scholars and these Christian scholars, they know what I'm talking about. They're not fools. So obviously, why haven't they cleaned it up yet? I mean, why haven't they cleaned up the fact that even the God is an anthropomorphic male? We've anthropomorphized a male figure with a beard, no less.
Yeah.
And this is a really amazing character, this Jehovah. I'll come back to this later because it turns out later, hopefully we can explore the idea of the connection between Jehovah and Lucifer, but let's leave that for a second. Because, again, these wonderful biblical stories tell us that this marvelously omnipotent God, when he's fed up over the sin that Satan has helped to tempt Eve and Adam, and then the fall takes place, and God is so, contemptuous of this fact and so wrathful over it that he destroys the entire creation, right? This is what the Bible says. Everybody's telling you that the whole creation, God was so angry and so indignant. I would say, why didn't he just destroy Satan, who caused the problem in the first place? Why destroy the whole creation? Why not just get rid of the person that you created who tempted? Get rid of the tempter and all is solved. No, keep the tempter well and truly alive. Satan lives, but the whole universe and everything in it, every plant, every person, every animal, the entire creation is destroyed, right, from God's wrath. But the prime mover, he's good to go. I mean, what on earth are we thinking about here?
Well, I mean, that's a question that, most exoteric readers should kind of ask themselves. I mean, in itself, that one question should kind of give them an idea that the foundation of the faith is kind of fragmented,
Exactly. And, that's not the only one. I mean, I've got a whole chapter in my Atlantis book on these contradictions. If people go to, I think it's the Irish Origins website, click on the link to Kersey Graves, and you'll have a lifetime of problems to solve when it comes to these contradictions. We've got millions of them, not just one. If we only had one or two, and then we would be just merely nitpickers and hair splitters, and any good Christian could turn around and go, shut up, okay, every text has its problems, even scientific volumes that are given to kids in school have errata every now and again, so, don't bash us. There's a couple of anachronisms in the Bible, get over it. But the only trouble is, you see, it's just, where do you stop? The whole thing is just a total mess, and it gets more profound when you have this concept regarding Satan. That's not a small thing. You're talking about the universal tempter. You're talking about the guy under everybody's bed. You're talking about the guy that has, through your belief in him, entire nations have been slaughtered. You're talking about the guy who has kids and adults shivering in fear that if they bite their fingernails, they're going to go to hell. So this is an enormous concept here. And when you go into it, you find out that the Gnostics, the Essenes, the Therapeutai, the Mandeans, anybody that was anybody in the time at the formation of Christianity and obviously before, that word only meant opposer. The word Satan actually only means opposer. And that can be proven because when Jesus has that line in the Bible, when he's talking to, I think it's Peter, where he says, get thee behind me, Satan. There's this term, get behind me, Satan.
Yeah.
That is simply all he's saying there is, get behind me, you opposer.
Yeah.
So it's like you saying to somebody who kept contradicting you that day, no, just shut up, get behind me.
Yeah.
Because Satan meant you keep opposing me, you're taking the rival view here, and I'm canceling you out. I'm telling you to keep it quiet. So there's that aspect. In any kind of a Gnostic meeting or an Essene group, when they all gather together, the brotherhood, and the main person was speaking, just like in the Senate in Rome, just like in the Parliament today, you have the opponent who brings up the opposing point of view. I mean, it's so common. We have that still in our life today, in our world today. And that being was known as the Satan, the opposer, the rival. That's all it ever meant. It just meant that. And so we have that in the Bible. But when you realize then that this word only refers to those who take the opposite or contradictory point of view, we again have a big problem understanding wherefore came the horned one and the cloven hoofs and all the other malarkey that came with it. I mean, this is just total fairy tales. This is fiction. We're in the realm of the mad here, the realm of the psychotics.
Big power mechanism, eh?
Yeah, well, here, I've got a quote from Lawrence Gardner on the subject. He says, nowhere in the Genesis account is there any mention, direct or indirect, of Satan's involvement. And yet it has become common practice for the church to portray the serpent as an emissary of Satan or even as Satan himself. So the word Satan doesn't even appear in Genesis.
Right.
You go over the microphone and start talking to any Christian, or the ones that we have in our families. And they'll just tell you, looking you straight in the eye, that Satan did this and Satan did that in the Garden of Eden and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just unbelievable that that word doesn't even appear there, and this serpent is a completely different concept. And they don't even need to know that, oh, look, the original Genesis story was the epic of whatever from Babylon and Sumeria. We don't even need to get into that it was a plagiarized story in the first place, because that would just send them potty, right? Just stick with the Bible and tell them that, look, the very recounting that you're giving me of this story doesn't make sense. It's not there in the original text.
Yeah, I mean, you know, with regards to Satan, because clearly you've broken that connection that's so commonly kind of misunderstood. Is there a connection with Satan and Saturn and the Saturnalia cults, or have I kind of gone down the wrong road with that? There is, yeah?
There is, to the extent that Saturn, astrologically and mythologically, is the opposer.
Right.
Again, nothing evil. It's just that Saturn symbolism is that adamantine stone, or let's just say, metaphysically speaking, the Saturn is the unmovable, unchangeable principles of a thing.
Okay.
He's lead, he's black, he's time, he's Kali, he's karma, he's death. He's that which you can do absolutely bugger all about. Venus can embellish, beautify, Mars can activate, Jupiter can enlarge, Neptune can dream and give you fantasy and imagination and thrill your inspirations, you see. Mercury can chatter and explain and dissect and create sophistry. And so you have a lot of room for different sorts of players on the stage. But Saturn is the unmovable, unchanging point. It's like the relic. It's like the Dirty Harry who, how many years go by, he remains exactly that one fixed, unchanging point, the unswaying one, right?
Yeah.
So that is that person, that's that personality, that's that fixed traditions, let's say principles that simply, no matter what you do to embellish it, no matter what you do, can never ever alter or change. So in that sense, that's that truth. In one way, that is a definition of truth as well. It's that which is fundamental about you. It's that which is fundamental about the cosmos. And that's just an incredible study there.
Yeah.
So, and then, once you have that great phallic black stone of truth, that Saturnian, satanic, if you will, truth, right? Then everything is sort of, in a way, measured from that point. And there's nothing that can be done about it. So what you have here is an inversion. Like in many aspects, Christianity simply inverted things that have been known for thousands of years. They inverted the horned one. That was nothing more than the forest god Hern, for goodness sake. Even Moses got those horns from the Old Testament. It was such a common symbol of knowledge. In fact, the crown of thorns that Jesus wears is a stylized version of the crown of the antlers of the deer, the great stag god of old, all of this. So again, they skewed it, they misinterpreted, they twisted it round, and this is why we have this vastly great problem. Because if Satan is Satan in the Christian sense, then why is Jesus talking to Peter and calling him Satan? If Lucifer is so damn dark and evil, why in many traditions was Jesus known as the star, or the rising sun, or the morning sun? Why is Mary of Bethany, that's Mary Magdalene, referred to as Lucifer, Mary the light bringer? Why is there a character in mythology called Diana Lucifera? In fact, you can find it on Ellis Island. The statue that we know as the Statue of Liberty is literally the statue portraying a goddess known as Diana Lucifera.
Yeah.
Diana the Lightbringer. This thing permeates all forms of Catholicism and Christianity. It can be looked up in any reference work. So that then contradicts it, doesn't it? It contradicts this narrow Christian idea that, wait a minute, there's a devil with some horns on his head, and a forked tail. I mean, obviously, even from their own tradition, there's anecdotes about Satan and Lucifer that contradict that. And now we're not even talking about the astrotheology yet. One of the most interesting aspects to explain the Satan-Lucifer problem is simply the astrotheological one.
Okay.
One anecdote about that is simply that, just as I said that Jesus said to Peter, "Get thee behind me, Satan," that is a direct astrotheological, esoteric anecdote, because that's exactly what the priests at the temple of the Eastern Gate, when they looked at the eastern horizon every year, or possibly even every certain mornings, when the heliacal rising of Mars has always been considered, again, the opposer, very much identified with Satan and Jehovah. And so the priests would see, or in astrotheological tradition, let's say, the priests at the temple of Heliopolis and Giza, and even at later stages, they'd look and they would have this motto that said, "Get thee down Mars, get thee down Satan," because what they said is that the star that was trying to rise with the sun, heliacally means as the sun is rising at the horizon and the light of the sun is about to rise over the horizon, just before that time happens, you see the twinkling of the star Mars. And so that was considered the rivalry, that Mars is trying to be arrogantly and flagrantly opposing the light of the Christ, the sun, or Aton, or Amun, or Ra, or whoever it might have been, right? So they would say, get thee down, don't try to challenge or rival this. So this was a well-known astrological motto of the priests, again tying into the fact that Mars, the tempter, the Lucifer, the opposer, was being told, get thee behind, or get thee down, get thee lower, bow thy head down, get down on your belly, don't try to rival the great sun, the great Mithras, the true solar aspect, you see.
So, I mean, this is really interesting information here. I would love to kind of get into a deeper study of this astrotheology subject matter, because it's something I haven't looked at with too much depth. But can I just ask, Michael, like you mentioned, say Amun, Ra, Aton, Mithras, are these anthropomorphic gods? I mean, when we hear these names, is that kind of an anthropomorphic character representation of kind of esoteric properties, so to speak?
Oh yes. In fact, the very fact that gods became anthropomorphic signals a particular epochal change and the rise of patriarchy, basically. One can argue that before the patriarchal period, when you had more of a matriarchal, let's say, or just even more of a pagan concepts, the gods were not as anthropomorphized. They certainly weren't as masculine all the time. And they tended to be more hermaphroditic, perhaps even androgynous, perhaps even zoomorphic. And we certainly know that's true of Ireland, and in Egypt they have that in common, where they have zoomorphic gods that are part animal hybrids. Yeah. Not that, this is, a lot of this again is astrological metaphor. Yeah. But when the rise of the solar cult, the hardened solar cultism came about, and then you have this sort of move of patriarchy, then you start to see this, and that's why you see it in Rome, and you see it in Greece, and subsequently you see it a lot, in which there's this removal of these more animalistic tropes and motifs, and just the simple masculinization of the god, and then his combat against entities or beings that were actually the old gods. So in the new solar cult periods, you suddenly see the great hero doing combat with gods that are really basically just rescriptions of earlier gods, as a matter of fact. He's the conqueror of the dragon, he's the conqueror of some entity, or he fights these other... You see this a lot in the Mahabharata of India, where it's actually the older gods that are being deposed. There's a lot of propaganda involved, no different than the coming of Christianity.
Right. Okay, well, I mean, behind all of these concepts, there's clearly a great kind of body of knowledge and intellect in regards to esotericism, the metaphysical aspect of things, and very much a spiritual and scientific kind of aspect as well. Do you know what I mean? Now, would this have come from Lucifer, perhaps? This kind of knowledge and understanding to kind of apply this almost blueprint map out to kind of give us an idea of what is taking place beneath the scenes. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't know about that. I'd say that the kind of technocrats who run the world and are looking to create the scientific dictatorship and have been working on it slowly, there is no doubt about it that these people can be directly tracked back to the worship of, say, Mithras and Serapis, and certainly my favorite, Aton, the Atonism. Okay. And then when you have done the homework that I've done, like I point out in this Irish Origins book, then you find out that this Aton is Lucifer. Right. Again, let's hold off on the value judgment and just simply, from a purely etymological, purely logical, mythological, and historical point of view, just point out that Aton is Lucifer, because Aton is the rising sun. When Akhenaten himself physically got up in the morning to worship his sun, that was called Aten, he did so by looking at the eastern horizon and waiting for the sun to actually rise. That was the holiest moment of the day, and they never missed it. And even the city that Akhenaten built, it's at the place called Amarna, that temple precinct in which Akhenaten lived was called Akhetaten. and Ta 10 is horizon.
All right.
So the sun at the horizon, and he built the buildings and had the prayer centers and had the temples, facing obviously the eastern horizon, so that every single morning they'd rise up and greet the sun. And by the way, just as an anecdote, when the sun would set, literally go beneath the horizon, regardless of what time it is, these characters just literally went to bed. They didn't even stay up after darkness. They had such an antipathy to the darkness. But the point is that the fact that the sun moving over the horizon was the key moment. Now, if you look at the Discover card, the credit card, if you look at the symbol for Nissan cars and umpteen other corporate logos, you'll see this exact principle in a sort of a designer version where you find the horizon and the sun half above, half below this particular meridian point. And you find it in hotels and all sorts of places you find the symbol of the rising sun. And so Aton, that disk, was known as the god of the horizon, right? The god of the morning star, in other words. And that's the very term that is used in not only in the Bible but elsewhere to refer to this Lucifer, the bringer of light, the one who brings light to us. Now, how this becomes extremely intriguing is that you find out then that in the earliest books of the Old Testament, in the old books of the so-called Jews, they don't use the word Jehovah. They worship Jehovah, but they don't use that name. They don't physically utter the name Yahweh or Jehovah for Jehovah. What word did they use is Adon. A-D-O-N. And that's exactly the same word as Aton. The fact that there's a T and a D, we don't want to, it's quite long-winded to explain all of this, but it's about consonants and how they change and say the same and so on. But Adonai is the name that the Hebrew rabbis used in ancient times to stand in place of the god Jehovah. Now, if they're using the name of the god of the ancient solar cult of Akhenaten, then we know that there's a tie there. We know that basically, and after you do more homework, you find out that this Adonai is nothing more than a nom de plume,
a reference to Aton, do you mean?
Basically, exactly, reference to Aton. And then it'll tell you that it refers to their Jehovah or Yahweh.
Okay.
And then you find out that Jehovah is, in Hebrew, is 4 sacred letters, Yod, He, Vav, He. And Yod, which is the English J, sometimes Y, but J, that the numerical correspondence is 10.
Right.
Aten. Right?
Yeah.
So the J, the first letter of the God that Christians and Jews worship, is symbolized by the number 10. It's called Yod, and it literally refers to either the 1 or the 10, but definitely the 10. And so we have 10 Downing Street, the house of Aton, with the solar disk above the door and a little arrow of Mars. My work shows this, that this whole concept is atomistic based. So Jehovah equals Aton. So in other words, the God, like that. First of all, wait a minute, I thought we were just studying about Satan and Lucifer. How did God get involved? You find out that we've been had. And these Masons are in stitches. Because, and let me elaborate the point, because is it not true that within the so-called conspiracy movement, a very great proportion of them, they call themselves the Truth Movement, are right-wing Christians?
Yeah.
And is it not true that those right-wing Christians, God love them, is it not true that they are doing their utmost best to get rid of the evil Illuminati and the evil Freemasons?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, then in steps Majkl Tsarion with a bit of a question. How the hell do you do that when they are your creators? When the God you worship is the same God that they worship. And you can, when Albert Pike and these people are writing about, what did he say? We worship Lucifer. I've got quotes from rabbis. I'll find it in a minute, where he's telling the Jewish congregation, be under no illusion. We don't like to admit it, but our God is Lucifer.
It's quite out there now, isn't it, in the public domain that this is the case. Freemasonry at the top level, the hierarchical level, that the God is Lucifer, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, in fact, here it is, I found it. Harold Wallace Rosenthal, interviewed in 1976, says that most Jews do not like to admit it, but our God is Lucifer. Christians who immediately try to, hide behind the pews at this moment. No. He's not saying anything evil. He doesn't mean Lucifer in the evil way. He means it in exactly the way Albert Pike meant it. Our God is Adonai. Our God is Aton. Our God is Jehovah. What's your problem? And then you go to Adam Weishaupt, head of the Illuminati. Right? What does he say? Freemasonry is hidden Christianity. At least my explanations of the hieroglyphics fits this perfectly. And in this way in which I explain Christianity, no one need be ashamed to be a Christian. Well, what the hell do they know that we don't know? On paper, again, shoddy scholarship, are trying to tell you that, number one, these Illuminati were anti-monarchy, anti-royalist, totally a pack of lies. And two, that they're anti-Christian, totally a pack of lies. The leader's telling you we're Christians. You need not be ashamed to be a Christian. I'll accept anybody, because we're all in the same coterie together. And I'm only mentioning Pike and Weishaupt. You can go through all of these writings of these leaders and all these Masons, and they have no problem. The first thing you see when you walk into a Masonic hall is the Bible open.
Yeah.
Yeah, and half the malarkey that they're into is based on Masonry. I've done an elaborate series of interviews called The Brotherhood of Death on this to show how incredibly entwined these things are. So what they're talking about is that their God and Lucifer are one. I didn't say that. They're saying it. So nobody else can refute this. It is simply a statement of fact. And the fact that it's not widely known doesn't change the fact that it's a truth. And then when you realize the word Satan doesn't even enter into it at all, this is a complete misnomer, right? Then you start coming upon the truth that they do this because they're worshipping the sun, and the sun is up there, so it's astrotheology that you're into. And then you understand that then astrotheology becomes the basic hermeneutic key to open the door to all these other conundrums. You see, as I said, we're in the age of answers, and if you have the guts to accept the answers, which possibly means a sacrifice of what you first believed in, well, you're well on your way then. And you will have these tools to open the door to the mysteries of everything that has been, in fact, everything. I'm talking about all the mysteries to everything in life, but specifically that which has been deliberately hidden from us, you will have the answers to.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, because it's funny, you can kind of get trapped in certain areas of study by kind of, when you get into a certain point and you find you've kind of opened a can of worms, and you're getting kind of led around the garden path, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? And it's almost as if a lot of, like the mystery schools, for instance, it seems that a lot of the mysteries themselves are purely just kind of keeping the initiates and that are hungry for these mysteries and hidden truths, kind of keeping them in ignorance as they kind of control them directly, when there is not really much to tell apart from when you're at the higher levels of this. Do you know what I mean?
That's right.
I hope that made sense. I mean, I was stumbling on my words. I'm just trying to express,
No. You're right. They have the inner lodge. I have other quotes, by the way, from Adam Weishaupt saying exactly what you're saying. And he even says it contemptuously.
Right.
He says, you punks that join our order and you think you know shit, you got to go very far up the line, and then maybe we'll tell you what it's all about. We're keeping you in ignorance. Ignorance is the name of the game. And again, outside the lodge, we're still in a hierarchy outside the lodge. It's just that, there's a bit of a difference. Yeah. But the same rules applies out here. Look, people will come into Ellis Island from all around the globe saying we're free, we've arrived in America, looking up at the Statue of Liberty and not even realizing that that's Diana Lucifera, and the Masons are having a ball. They're absolutely screaming with laughter. That wasn't Milton Berle or Jim Carrey standing there modeled for the Statue of Liberty. Yeah. That is Diana Lucifera. Why that? It's not a giraffe. It wasn't Groucho Marx. Where did they get that symbol? Why is it a woman with those 7 rays? Does anybody... But the fact is they don't. They're only beginning to wake up to say, why this as opposed to something else? Things that philosophers ask all the time. Why this and not something else? The whole human race has got to start asking this. Why only male and female in the world? Why not 3, 4, 5 sexes? Why do we... So the questions. And so people can either hide from these great questions, metaphysical or conspiratorial or psychological or whatever. Why the stripes on the American flag and so on? Why all of this stuff? What do these numbers and these symbols? Why do they have a number 10 Downing Street? Why isn't it number 15? This is the kind of thing that I think needs to happen. Is that people need to really get curious again, and then start asking these questions, because we are actually in the age of these answers. Why? For instance, did you know that one of the earliest meanings of the word fish in Old French is loose.
Oh, I see.
But is not the fish the symbol that most Christians use?
It is, yeah.
Right. But in Old French, luce, L-U-C-E. And I think even in Scotland they have an equivalent, talking about some sort of pike, like the famous pike of Scotland, right? All the pike fishermen know about that. Well, one of the early names of that fish or I think it's a fish very similar, was the luce. And so Lucifer has another connection to the symbol of the fish. Now, that opens up another door, because earlier we talked about astrotheology. Now we can talk about geometry, because what is the famous fish shape in geometry is the Vesica Pisces.
Yeah. This is a very interesting subject, this one, the sacred geometry, isn't it?
Isn't it? And isn't it true that the Vesica Pisces is absolutely identifiable to the goddess? Well, it's the fish. It's the womb. It's the what you call the vagina. You know, the womb shape. You even see in architecture, Jesus will be sitting in what's called the mandorla. It's like a sort of arch, like a Vesica symbol.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they have this with the church as well, don't they? As you go into the entrance of the church, you're entering the goddess and so forth, you know.
Exactly. Mother Church. Well, that's loose. That is not only the Vesica Pisces. We have ancient gods, Uanes. We've got Dagon, who are fish gods. So even in the mythology of gods, some of the most greatest gods, certainly in Celtic Ireland, you have the thing called the salmon of knowledge. So the fish represented knowledge. You have it very strongly in Irish mythology, the salmon of knowledge, the Vesica Pisces, the wisdom of the fish, Jesus and the two fishes, you know, and then the feeding of the 5,000 and all the rest of it. What's this fish number? This is because these are adepts. These are people, these are masters of the great sciences. These Jesus Christs, these stars, these Lucifers, were the keepers of that sacred knowledge that you've just been mentioning and alluding to, that they're holding it from us. They covet it. They're not serving all mankind. They're not saying, mankind, this knowledge is for you. They're saying it's for us, because we understand that knowledge is power. Who the hell is this Henry Luce?
Who is this?
Used to be the head of Time magazine. 33rd, yep. Knights of Malta, 33rd degree Freemason. Just happens to be called Henry Luce. May mean nothing.
Yeah.
Gotta observe these things.
Yeah, you get quite a lot of them, you know, people called Sol and all the rest of it, you know.
Yeah, that's right. All over the place. Like this latest wedding that's just taken place. Check out the Kate Middleton and all the symbolism behind that. It's just unbelievable. It's in your face every day. They know about it.
I mean, we spoke a little while ago briefly via email, and you did mention that the astrological positioning of the stars at the time of the royal wedding was quite interesting. Do you remember that at the moment? Only
the fact that it was, in Taurus or whatever.
Right.
It's slipped me by right now. I have to brush up on it. But certainly, absolutely, one thing you can always guarantee is that whenever they do something like this, there is a very great importance to it. I think what we were speaking about was the fact that the sign of the 13th sign of the zodiac was prominent in the sky when it happened.
Ah, yeah, that could have been it. Yeah. Also, with regards to something I picked up on when I mean, it was on the television. I wanted to see the symbolism for myself firsthand while they were putting this across the screens, and to see that many people out there is a little bit disheartening, you know, kind of celebrating this wedding all there at the palace and what have you. But it was interesting. I was actually on the computer, and at the time that the Queen came out onto the balcony, I mean, I think it was either 13:11 or 11:13, depending on what time the wedding was. And there was another significant time that she went back in, and I'm sure this is not kind of by mistake, is it? There's definitely a Kabbalistic element to everything these people do, you know.
Sure it is. The clock is made of 12 hours, just like the zodiac is made of 12 signs and the months of 12 years. So they use that mini zodiac, in other words, the clock, exactly based on numerology. Why sometimes you're not able to work it out is because it's based on their personal date of birth. So somebody might be saying, I don't see any symbolism in it, but that's because they're told to do things based on their day chart. It's very similar to the system I have for my clients on time gnosis. We have a daily chart there, and it's based on each individual person's birth date. Right. So it's not just an objective thing, you see, in which there's a lot of objective ritual to this, but there's also the subjective aspect where these people's own dates of birth, their personal private chart, is being activated. And people should not doubt this for one instant, because I got the proof. I know that it's a lot of people talking, hearing you speak about this for the first time, go, what the hell is this? Well, if this what the hell is this, go and watch my video on my YouTube site, Unslaved Films. There's a thing I did there called the Declaration of Deception. It's very short. People can watch it. During that YouTube presentation, you can freeze the video at the chart of the birth of the United States of America.
Okay, interesting.
yeah, just show it, just passing. You can see that the chart, this is a totally official astrological chart of the absolute day of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and freeze that and look at it. And you will see a perfect Star of David. I would say these are the Judites, these are the Davids, these are the people who are the top Illuminati. Yeah. And the Star of David is the old Star of Solomon. It's one of the most sacred of all their stars. It's also a Masonic star. What are the chances, if anybody is listening to this who happens to be into probability and statistics and so on, I'm certainly not, what are the chances that the greatest country in the world, the United States of America, happens to be founded on the exact moment, and by the way, these charts are done like really literally to the moment, that the arrangement of planets and stars in the heavens makes a perfect Star of David. Mm. Is that accident? You damn well bet it isn't. And if you go into all the other arrangements, the layings of different stones and all these other timings and things that were involved in the founding of America and the founding of the famous cities there, it will leave even the most skeptical person in no doubt at all of what I'm talking about. Yeah. But what they have to say, what one has to understand then, is that it's not just astronomy and astrology and street geometry that these people employ. They employ numerology. They employ the stellar zodiac. Mm. They employ color. They employ light, as we've been talking about. And that's why they call themselves the Princes of Light. Mm. That's why every Masonic diadem you look at has light radiating from behind it. Yeah. Or in it. That's why our culture is just permeated with the symbol of the sun and this use of light, you see, all over our culture today.
Yeah, I mean, when we had our previous interview some time back, we were speaking about Akhenaten and the cult of light. I remember you did mention there's certain occult properties to light.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Could you tell us what maybe some of these properties are? Because it's been racking my brain.
I'd love to get into that. That's basically the whole nub of this whole thing. Right. Here's a line from Akhenaten's hymn to Aton. Okay. And let me just add again for the Christian listener, the hymn to Aton has now been absolutely universally accepted as the prototype to the Song of Solomon.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, in the Bible, almost verbatim, by the way.
Really?
So if you don't want to have a heart attack, don't go and look up what I'm saying, because if you do, prepare to have a stiff drink beside you, because they have line by line the Song of Solomon, the Psalms, and what have you, absolutely stripped down. These biblical scholars of the highest credibility. I'm talking about seminarians, not some wacko jacko, Majkl, Tsarion, and Jordan Maxwell. No, nobody from outside the wall. Absolute academics have now understood that the Songs of Solomon, the great Solomon, are based on Egyptian lore. Right out of Akhenaten's hymn to Aton. Here's one of the first lines. At daybreak, when thou arisest on the horizon, when thou shinest as the Aton by day, thou drivest away the darkness and givest thy rays. Those were the opening lines. Mm. The rays. Giving, okay. In fact, Ray comes from Ra, the god Ra. Right? We say Amen at the end of Christian prayers to say light on everything. This Egyptology is full of it. But getting back to your question about the actual psychic dictatorship, this is of absolutely monumental importance. And it factors into understanding why these people worship this god. There's millions of gods. Volcano gods, fish gods. I don't know what kind of gods you've got. Thunder gods. Everybody's got a god, right? Mm-hmm. Why worship Aton? Why worship Adon? Why worship this Yahweh, this Yahweh, this Jehovah? Well, what is this? It's because he's a god of war. As I said, the planet Mars. Mars is always associated in astrology with wars, and he's also one of the gods identified corresponding to the tempter, the Lucifer, right? Okay. Here's a quote from Exodus 15:3. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name, right? So the Lord's a man of war. There it is. He wields a sword. He's got a big stick. I've got umpteen quotes from Martin Luther saying, and John Calvin going, God made the sword to kill you all. God made the war. God made justice, and that's the end of it. I've got a quote here that says, it is very plainly put in our arcane literature. Right? It is very plainly put in our arcane literature that Jehovah was originally a lord of Mars. He is also the god of battles. Mars and its lord are somehow deeply associated with strife and violence, affecting and afflicting that type of humanity inhabiting the earth. Mm-hmm. So Mars and Jehovah are one. That means Mars and Lucifer are one. Okay. So This is very frightening to me. I don't think this is like a joke or anything. This fiery god of volcanoes and mass murder and genocide, and anyone who loves that topic should just open the Bible at the beginning, start reading Deuteronomy and Exodus, and they'll have a great old time. There's no Arnold Schwarzenegger disaster slaughter film that comes close to what David and Solomon and whoever else, Indeed. Moses and Aaron. These are the greatest, action heroes you've ever seen in your life, man. Mm-hmm. Well, these boys are out for blood, right? Mm-hmm. This is their God, the God of light, the God of Masons, the God of Albert Pike, the God of every Christian and every Jew. That's why they've done nothing but slaughter each other from time immemorial and getting on everybody else's tits while they're doing it. Mm. They worship a God of disaster. They worship a God of fire and brimstone.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to understand here is that it really doesn't matter that you call him God or Satan. It's all one and the same thing. Remember, I was making that allusion that hardcore right-wing Christians have a devil of a time because God love them. They unfortunately on pretty much quicksand because the God that they worship is a Masonic God.
Yeah. And they're not aware of this, so.
Not aware of it, no. It's a big shocker because they're doing good work, many of them.
That's just complete mind control, isn't it? I mean, on a major level, we're talking on a psychological wavelength,
Very much so. And I'm not being flippant when I say that. I mean, I've had conversations with Tex Mars and Jim Mars and Alex Jones, and this is and others, and they kind of have a vague understanding of this, but they're very loath to really get into it because it would ruin everything. It would destroy the very fabric of everything that they believe. That what are you telling us here? That our religion that came from the Jewish came from the Israelites, the Levites that came from Aton, and we're back. We're all along. We've been standing on the very battlements created by the very God that we're trying to dethrone. This causes lots of problems.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a major issue between the different factions, isn't it?
Yeah. But then, getting back to your question more specifically, and let's take it from a scientific point of view.
Okay.
Let's start just outside any occultism at all. The practical use of the weapon of light. I used to teach this to kids about watching the television and seeing how light was used. Driving through the city streets at night, and you see that all the buildings are still lit. Your fluorescent, flashing, marvelous lights in the schoolroom, which is just totally entraining your brain. And all the rest of it, right? The cop who flashes the light in your eyes to weaken your melatonin. Here's a quote from a very important book called, this is actually a different quote. It's from Lawrence Gardner, Genesis of the Grail Kings.
Okay.
A lot of your audience may have already read this book. Here's a quote. It says, "Only in very recent times have medical scientists identified the hormonal secretion of the pineal gland. It was isolated in 1968 and became known as melatonin, which simply means night worker from the Greek melos, black, and tostos, labor. Because people with a high melatonin output react strongly to sunlight, which affects their mental capacity."
See, this is the interesting stuff for me here. This aspect of it is definitely something that we need to look at, a little closer. It's kind of overlooked, isn't it, in the alternative field?
Yeah, it is. Isn't it? Because by virtue of this, they are night operatives, and melatonin is called it's called the hormone of darkness, being produced only at night or in the dark. As you know, one of their beloved symbols is the owl. Bear that in mind. So exposure to an excess of natural light makes the pineal gland smaller, and lessens spiritual awareness,
Yeah.
Whereas darkness and high pineal, remember we're talking about inversions?
Yeah,
What
indeed.
greater inversion? So I have to finish it before we even get into the digressions, right? It says, so exposure to an excess of natural light makes the pineal gland smaller and lessens spiritual awareness. Whereas darkness and high pineal activity enhance the keen intuitive knowledge of the subtle mind, while reducing the stress factor. The melatonin is manufactured by the pineal gland through an activated chemical messenger called serotonin. Melatonin also enhances and boosts the body's immune system, and those with high pineal secretions are less likely to develop cancerous diseases. High melatonin production heightens energy, stamina, and physical tolerance levels, and is directly related to sleep patterns. Now we maybe have a grasp on why these princes of light love their light.
Gosh, this is some deep information you're uncovering here. Definitely.
Now we understand why they call themselves illuminists and why they manipulate, because they're not only just robbing you of your... what he forgot to mention, by the way, is that melatonin and serotonin are the hormone of independence.
Okay, tell me more.
When the cop shines the light in your face, it, as Gardner's pointing out here, the melatonin... Imagine melatonin flowing from the pineal is like a river. The moment that bright sunlight is shone on it, or any kind of strong light, that river dries up. And since it's the hormone of independence, that means that your independence is lowered. Just like your immune system is lowered, so is your sense of independence.
I see.
Yes, sir, 3 bags full, sir, what can I do for you? And you're shaking like a leaf. They use the light because that will reduce your sense of rebellion and indignancy. And they can, the famous Humphrey Bogart scenes where they got all the lights on, the guys are grilling the hell out of him, right? Getting the confession and so on. Right. That's knowledge. That's knowledge. They're shining the light on you. So in our superlit, fluorescent existence, why people are walking around like zombies can be understood. You don't even need to bring anything to do with occultism into it at all. You're in an occult circle. You're in a city, a cetus, coming from the Latin word meaning the womb.
Really?
Yeah, hall. City hall is phallus. Phallus. Hall is an abbreviation of phallus.
Right.
City is the female circle, the civic circle, which is why you have circles and towers, circles and clocks, circles and obelisks. They're moving us around on a checkerboard. We don't even have the faintest idea what's going on. These people have us completely under the hex. And they know how light works, and that we also become addicted to it. Because once your natural hormones are shrunk into a state of complete desiccation, you're more likely to then have to rely, like a druggie, right? You're now addicted to the external form of the light, or the external stimulation. Because you have your inner stimulation, your inner imagination, your inner intuition, your right brain, and probably even your damn immune system, let alone your bioenergetics, is running at an all-time low. It's in the minus zone. And then what do? We got TV. We got America's, we got Hollywood.
This information here, Michael, where would you advise people to look for more info on this subject that you're talking about here?
Let's see, there's a book called Catching the Light. If they go to my appendices pages on the Irish Origin site, there is a page there called Light Masonry and something else. It's very easy to find. Just go to Irish Origins, click on appendices, click on this Light and Masonry link, and there's a list of books at the end that will talk about this. Because you see, it's not so much about, anybody can look up anything and just look up a melatonin, research what I've been saying here. Because don't forget that this is like Chinese dolls. You start off studying melatonin and light, and then you end up into perception. You're into the eye. Isn't the eye a Vesica Pisces?
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
Isn't the light that enters the eye phallic?
Yeah, this is very interesting. I actually read that on your site some time back. This concept here was extremely intriguing. I know where you're going with this, Michael, and yeah, it is indeed, yeah.
Right. So, isn't it a parable? Isn't it an exact duplicate of the sexual act?
Indeed, it is, yeah. With the stimulation of the nerves and what have you.
Right. So one wouldn't probably call it orgasmic, but it is. The very fact of light entering the eye and touching the retina at the back makes you feminine and reality masculine. And even though it's such a micro level of stimulus, it is like an orgiastic experience to you on a subconscious level. In the same way that sex act is obviously a much more visceral version of this. So the act of light entering your eye and entering your brain, entering your retina, is a sexual act, a pansexual act. This is the kind of knowledge that what I'm sharing with you now is the kind of knowledge that these Masons are fully conversant with. They know, we don't know. Okay, well, the Illuminati know all of this. They have this kind of knowledge about the way the human biology works, what perception's about the almost erotic act of looking, seeing. Even the Leonardo da Vinci's, all artists of great caliber know this. The sumptuous capacity to look at something beautiful. And then again, this in ancient days they would have noticed this, that the eye being the shape of the vesica, I just put a link up on my symbolism page on the forum about that age-old image of an eye and a hand. You know, someone holds up a hand and you see the eye in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible work that this guy's done on that. And then we're into the whole story of the mind and the brain and perception and what is perception and how that when you look at a thing, you've become that thing and you've entered into a relationship with that thing, you see. So there's so many metaphysical dynamics to this. It's just that these are very beautiful philosophical principles. My worry is always about how those wonderful, beautiful things that are meant for the uplift of mankind have been manipulated by those who are using it against us. So the things that I'm talking about, or this stuff about melatonin, this is a perfectly fantastic thing.
Yeah.
We have I've often spoke about how, like, if you take a particular animal like ants or whatever, or any creature, you can train that animal directly, or you can also train it peripherally, meaning that you can change its habitat and it doesn't even know that its behavior is going to have to adjust to changes that you're making outside of its awareness, right?
Yeah.
So we are trained by parents, we're trained by school, we're trained directly by priests and people that are in your face training. And then we have this more subtle hand of manipulation that changes our basic habitat, if you will.
Yeah.
And the use of light is one of the ways that they're doing it. Symbolism is another way that they're doing it. And we adjust to it. So obviously, like I said at the beginning of our program here, in order to combat any of this pestilence, you have to know what the enemy's doing. That means you have to be intelligent. You have to observe what they're doing. You've got to get a handle on know thy enemy and know what weapons he's using, and then you move to the next step of what to do about it. So people who then, understand this will stay away from fluorescent lights. They might change the lighting in their own homes. They may have candlelight. They may spend more time in the half light. They may not need the 15 lights on in their house like most Americans, for instance, are wont to do. Realizing that you're just in yourself. You watch less television, perhaps, just based on that principle alone, that you don't want to be besieged by this phosphorescence, because you know what it's doing, you see.
I mean, there's also, I mean, that what you just said there, that's obviously really important when people are aware of these things. But I think another really important side to it is actually changing the way we think towards things. I mean, just a moment ago, about 5 minutes ago, when you mentioned about, the ancients would have recognized the eye as the same shape as the Vesica Pisces, it opens another dimension of thought, of thinking. It's not the constructed, everyday kind of cyclic thinking that these people were using. And I think the more we expand and the more we kind of explore these areas of thought, the easier this is going to become in being immune to the weaponry that's being used against us, and ultimately being free, happy, and to our full potential, exploring, life.
Yes, right. And you asked me at the beginning, what my talks will be about, what my talks are about. It's about that. And that is, I had this elaborated in the last chapter of the Atlantis book. You're not going to be able to Jackie Can these people out of existence. You can't take them on head to head. They're too smart for that.
Yeah.
The only way to combat universal evil, one of the ways, the most important way, is to become immune to it. Once you are aware of what your enemy is doing, like any, say, chess master, he's a chess master because he's surpassed everybody else. He knows all their stinking rotten strategies. They look pathetic to him. So he's immune to them. He's going to win with his eyes closed. So that's what we need to be doing. And the faster we get on to it, the faster this coterie will be taken down. But you see, until you know the psychology, remember you said a few minutes ago that you were disheartened to see that all these flag-waving mugs were out there?
At the palace, yeah.
Yeah, drooling over the marriage,
the
wedding. So, that's a case in point. The reason why people are still edified by this nonsense is because people need the father figure. People need the king. They may not like the king, or they may have quibbles about the physical queen, but I'm talking psychologically here. They'll accept any queen. Tomorrow, even America could turn around and say, hey, we should have an oligarch. They're halfway there already, or more than that, halfway there already. So tomorrow, you never know what might happen. And the point is, as Michel Foucault and so many other people have brought up, is that people want to be told what to do. A couple of minutes ago in history, we had kings, and kings told you what to do.
Yeah.
You didn't need to take personal responsibility. You just needed to follow orders. And if you serve the king well, or the baron, or the earl, you will get reward. He'll tell you who you can marry. He'll give you some land. He'll make you a knight. He'll dub you a knight. He'll give you some armor. He'll give you some money. And everything in your life is laid on by obedience to the king. The Christian is doing the same thing by his obedience to his God. We want God. We want it. We want Global Village. We want the master. It's good. And by the way, as a matter of fact, I don't even mean that I am speaking flippantly, but also I mean it quite strictly. The Global Village, Matthew, will be good. It will be a crime-free world. It will be Minority Report. It will be crime-free. It will provide everything that is needed for a man, just in the same way that in that speech in Movie Network, where he says all distress, all traumas will be satiated, all needs will be met. This scientific dictatorship, this global village that they're building, will in fact, from a physical point of view, from a material, physical, sensational point of view, be an absolute wet dream for people, because all of these things will be laid on, everything will be automated, and so forth and so on. And I can't kick that, because even a lot of the science and technology that they're going to bring and are creating is actually very good. The lame will walk, the blind will see, the paraplegic person will be able to function, and so on. So I'm not against the technique, I'm not against even the science, I'm only against the ideology behind it. But the point that I'm trying to make is that absence of the king, which again, historically speaking, is an extremely short time ago, has left us in almost an infantile state. Not everybody, obviously, but the vast majority of people really want that kind of archetype. So when they wheel it out in this more, conventional, contemporary way, that's why people just drool all over themselves. Have you not noticed, for instance, that many of the so-called celebrities of today, I mean, these are just punks who became celebrities, are driving around in Bentleys wearing huge gold rings and think of themselves as princes? They even mimic a lot of what royalty does in their acts or even in their costumes and what have you. So, and their ostentatiousness. Many of the world celebrities today who sort of the Mick Jagger syndrome I'm speaking of here, in which these people who start off as nothing, actually, in many ways, if you watch the symbolism of what they're doing, they're almost so egomaniacal, but they're also parodying or they want to simulate royalty.
And also, there's many aspects of masonry within the music culture and the Hollywood scene as well, isn't there?
Of course, yeah. They're through and through. I mean, they really do have a huge amount of control over the media, which means from advertising all the way down to the top 40 and what have you.
Madness. And with regards to these archetypes that a lot of the public or the population are relying on in a psychological sense, is this? I mean, I've heard you speak about Jung's work, Carl Jung's work. Is this the same kind of exoteric version of those archetypes? Are they presenting them at specific astrological times that there will be a craving for this kind of archetype? Are you with me?
Yeah, that's a perfectly valid way of looking at it. If you move from, say, just the Freudian idea of just the parents, absolutely, man has embedded within him the father archetype and the mother archetype as well. That's why we said the one anecdote we gave that fits is the coming of the people to America to seek freedom, Mother America to be embraced by the arms of the goddess, and so they put a goddess there coming over the ocean. Yeah, we have to leave our country, and that's a death. And we're looking for new life, which is birth. And then even the ship pulls in at the birth, it docks at the birth, like George Maxwell has said. Look at all the maritime symbolism is entirely based on birthing, mother giving birth to a child symbolism. America is born, the symbolism around America's chart, for instance, is again the Cancer. It's born under the sign of Cancer, which is the mother, the symbol of the mother.
Okay.
Cancer, anybody who has a Cancer knows that it's a water sign and it's a mother sign. So you have that aspect as well. And so these archetypes of the collective unconscious, as Jung would speak of, and believe me, he wasn't the first to discover these. Previous people had speculated that this kind of pre-conscious patterning existed. They were often called primordial images by previous sociologists and so on. And one could just call them encodations. They're just ideas that have an enormous amount of power. And that's an incredible subject when you actually get into it, about these archetypes. I've touched, as you say, I have touched on it. When I brought up Jung, I heavily brought up his shadow archetype.
Okay, yeah.
In my talks, because I'm very much fascinated by that, and I think that's a key part of this unfolding. My talk, hopefully at your convention, will also maybe be able to get into that a bit, also about the shadow work and what that implies and what the shadow really is, and what that implies and how it comes about and so on.
Yeah.
Very, very important key part of this working through to become immune, you see.
Mm-hmm.
Because one thing is, of late, maybe say the last 10, 15 years, you will have noticed how many sort of morbid type programs have been turning up. Programs on forensics, programs on, corpses and death, and even the films getting much more violent.
Yeah.
A lot more emphasis on serial killers and Satanists and evil,
Mm-hmm.
Hannibal Lecter type, kind of really dark, sick sort of films, right?
The age ratings are coming down as well, aren't they? Films that would be 18 a few years back are now 12,
Yes, exactly. So this falls under this heading. This falls under this necrophiliac shadow projection kind of thing, because the Illuminati, just like we said earlier about them giving us external forms of light and stimulation, because they know that we become completely archetypally raped within.
Yeah.
So they also know that we have the devil within us. We have wish fulfillment. We have a little bit of the rebel without a cause. We want to act out. And since we're not able to actually go and do that to most intents and purposes, so then they bring on the movies again with all of this violence and blood and guts and rebellion and superhero-ship, because we then vicariously can be that person, sort of the die-hard mentality. We vicariously get our kicks through those means.
I mean, we're really dealing with sick characters on the other side here, aren't we?
Yes, we are. These are definitely sorcerers. There are people who are possessed, although I don't mean that in strictly the Christian way, because there's other ways of being possessed than probably people know. Possession usually gives a idea of some sort of external, bizarre, again, negative power entering into you, and I don't doubt that that is quite the case. But there's other versions as well. I kind of want to hold off on that because I want to get more deeply into it in the actual talk as well.
Okay.
But to answer your question, absolutely. We are in this state right now because we are living in the forensic filth of the most toxic and self-murdered people that you could possibly imagine. That's one of the reasons why the collectivity is so key to them, why they're so much into the hive mentality, because they themselves individually, I mean, these Blairs, these Thatchers, and these Gorbachevs and Obamas and all, these people as individuals don't exist. I mean, they've given themselves over entirely to the collective and to their fraternities and to the system. They're just absolute automatons, products of the system. And that's why they rely on that system so much and want to turn the rest of us into that. They're very threatened. That's why the use of light on our melatonin, for instance, is done, because they don't like individuals. They have a tremendous hatred. I mean, an absolute pathological hatred for individuals, for independence. They loathe these things. At the most, they'll use them as talismanic words when it suits them. But ultimately, they despise it. They're absolute dyed-in-the-flesh collectivists in exactly the Ayn Rand way, in the way that that philosopher spoke. And these people are of the crowd. And they know that the crowd can be controlled through light, through fear, through anxiety, and so on. For instance, if you're in a train wreck, and most of the people are just like crawling around, having the faintest idea what to be doing, in any situation where there's a crowd, and any kind of time when there's trauma, everyone will look to a potential leader.
Yeah.
Either a conductor or some other passenger who happens to know about things and or got a little bit more guts than the average person, and he leads them all to, there's umpteen examples of this.
Yeah.
And so, everyone, and they've even seen this in just outdoor crowds. Any time when there's some sort of trauma, everyone normally just gets around the alpha person who stands up and sort of just, even without wanting to do so, ends up being the leader, the smart guy or whatever, or the more brave person, right? So what do we learn from this? We learn that collectivity, a certain amount of collectivity, is inevitable. Collectivity with a small c. How do we have tobacco? How do we have bananas and oranges?
Yeah.
Collectivity. Everyone helping each other. So when I talk against collectivity, I'm not speaking about the interactions between people, the associations, the socialization, the acculturation or the mercurial ebb and flow. That's not what I'm talking about at all. The collectivity that I have a problem with is the collectivity that becomes the means to annihilate the self. The person's giving himself over to the collective to such an extent that he is completely, abandons his own sovereignty and he abandons his own selfhood, and that's what's happening more and more and more along the line. And the trouble is that the more that it continues to happen, the less and less the Illuminati have to do. Because if the slave is doing his master's work for him, meaning if you are putting the shackles on yourself, if you're swimming into the jaws of the Leviathan of your own power, listen, you're doing Big Brother's work for him. He doesn't even have to move a muscle. So what I'm seeing today, you alluded to it about these gormless masses out there waving their flag. As well as there's an awakening taking place, there's also a greater need for the master, a greater avoidance of doing the shadow work, a greater immersion in the collective, a greater mind controlling coming through the media and so on. And so we are actually slowly incarcerating ourselves. It's Big Brother's wet dream. We're doing their work for them. And this is what has to be halted. This is what has to be sort of prevented and stopped,
Definitely. I mean, that's why we're doing the work we're doing, to get this information out there. I mean, what is encouraging is that, friends of mine have said that they've passed on the link and whatnot, and, you get kind of messages back from people saying, I introduced my cousin, for instance, to your website, and that they're really into it now, they're really digging up information on this. And it's a good feeling to know that people are listening and passing this information on. Hopefully we can get the kind of giant domino effect going on, eh?
I think so, and one of the other things that happened, a friend of mine told me that, again, a person that he knew in his family is absolutely stunned everybody because he is now open to a lot of this stuff, and they just can't believe it. And the reason is, one of the reasons is because a lot of people who are open-minded and decent and good people are hearing so much utter crap from people that they know that they're not getting into alternative matters because it's their first love. It's just that people are getting sick of the total illogical, irrational, and completely meaningless garbage that they're hearing every day, not just from the media, but from other people.
Yeah.
So the intelligent man is just going, that's a load of crap what you just said. I know that's not true. Say it's something about the war, Second World War, First World War, or the recent Gulf War, or the economic meltdown.
Or Osama bin Laden, eh?
Yes, exactly. On a daily basis, people are just going, I may not know what the truth is, but I certainly know that what you just told me is total and utter rubbish. Well, actually, that person has moved on further than they probably realize. That person is now ready to really get interested in something a lot more. As I said, we are definitely in the age of answers. I really do believe that.
Fantastic. I think that's a great way to wrap the show up as well, Majkl. We've covered some ground here, and it's been absolutely fantastic to have a chance to speak with you before the conference as well. I've been really intrigued tonight, so thanks, mate.
Oh, you're most welcome. I'd be glad to meet you and participate in your event. Again, I hold you in the highest esteem. That's why I said yes to coming to your conference, because I can't tell you the list of things I have to turn down, so it's always good to work with somebody who's up to speed, first of all, on these principles, who's doing the thinking, and then is, inspired and courageous enough to take it out to the rest of the world and provide that platform for people like myself. So I'm looking forward to it.
Definitely, me too. Okay, for those that don't know, the conference we're speaking about is the Big Awakening. It's down at the Middleton Arena, Manchester, and you can catch the details online. You can get tickets on our website, icanplanet.com. Also, check out Majkl's website. There's lots of information on there. There's a big section of appendices also, isn't there, Majkl, that you've published, so people can just kind of read through them without having to... I encourage people to buy the book, most definitely, but people can browse the site and get a little bit deeper into your area, your different areas of research if they want. That's MajklTsarion.com, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and that's the navigation page. I have 14 websites, and the 3 websites, Atlantis, Irish Origins, and Astrotheology, have very large appendices sections. Normally appendices are put into books, but the books were already so voluminous, I decided to put them onto the websites, and then also they can be added to ad infinitum, and so there's absolutely critical information on those appendices pages. So people are free to go there and check it out. Also in my forum, there's all up-to-date stuff, lots of up-to-date material that's sent to me from all over the world that we put up in the forum.
Well, it's been absolutely fantastic speaking with you, as I say, Majkl, and look forward to seeing you on the 18th at the Middleton Arena, mate. Okay,
thanks again.
You take care. All the best, mate.